Hi, we're here with Frank Schaeffer. He's written a book, Crazy for God. Can you give us a short bio about your background and how you became a part of this evangelical movement, and then how you got out of it and what you're doing now?
Well, my bio is really this book, Crazy for God, how I grew up as one of the elect, helped found the religious right, and lived to take all or almost all of it back. That's what the paperback looks like. And essentially, Crazy for God is a story that is obviously personal, because it's my story, but it also happens to be about the rise of the religious right in the United States in the 70s and in the 80s, because my father, Dr. Francis Schaeffer, who is not a household name to most Americans, but who was a guru to one element of the evangelical fundamentalist subculture, was really the father of the religious right as we come to know it. And so in my book, Crazy for God, what I tell the story of is this. And it's really a story that is a microcosm of a much bigger story. I talk about a little boy growing up in a very idealistic fundamentalist Protestant mission. The brief fellowship happened to be in Switzerland, which I talk about in the book, whose parents were your average fundamentalist missionaries, wanted to save people, teach them about Jesus, and so forth. And how that gradually evolved into something completely different, which was a ministry that had direct connections to the most powerful people in the United States, where you had my dad staying in the Reagan White House with Jerry Ford, sitting down with President Bush, the first President Bush, knowing these people on a regular basis, with me in then Congressman Jack Kemp's living room, showing him a film series we made called Whatever Happened to the Human Race, that along with Dr. C. Everett Koop and Dad, I put together to essentially bring evangelicals into the then beginnings of the pro-life movement. And so really the story I tell in Crazy for God is the story of someone who became the sidekick to a well-known evangelist, that was my father, then in my case became well-known and came into a leadership position myself in the evangelical movement. You could have found me on the platform as the keynote speaker to the Southern Baptist Convention, 23,000 Southern Baptist ministers out there. This was the 70s, so it was a sea of polyester blue. And Jerry Falwell was sending his jet to pick me up so I could come preach from his pulpit. I was on the 700 Club 7 or 8 times. Sat down with Oral Roberts at ORU, helped him map out, what his position or views would be on some of the things like the life issues and all these other things. So my story that I talk about in this book is basically the story of how one individual became seduced, as it were, away from my interest in religion as religion, and really saw it as a basis for political involvement. And that, of course, is the story of the whole rise of the religious right that involved millions of Americans and changed American politics forever, put the Republicans in office in many successive terms, both in Congress and in the White House, essentially was the thing that turned America toward the right and led to what we came to call the culture wars over issues such as abortion, gay rights, and so forth. And one of the reasons I left the movement in the mid-'80s and was completely out by 1990, both from evangelical Christianity but also out of the right wing of the fundamentalist movement, was that it was becoming increasingly extreme in a lot of areas, very homophobic. The pro-life movement had become violent. There were acts of intimidation against both abortion doctors, the clinics, and women going there. Civil disobedience was sliding toward things such as vandalism, firebombing clinics, and so forth. And I came to realize that what my father and I had done, along with C. Everett Koop, who was Ronald Reagan's Surgeon General, in turning the evangelical movement into a political wing of the Republican Party, the far right of the party, had a lot to do with setting the tone for what became really an insurgency in this country, trying to overthrow the government as we know it, in terms of not just rolling back Roe v. Wade and legal abortion, but also in effect, if you took it to the logical conclusion, turning America into a theocracy. Laws against homosexuality based on Old Testament law, laws against adultery or pornography or premarital sex, or any of these other things that would have been prescribed in the Bible. And so we were part of a movement that really would have turned America into a Western version of Iran, under that theocracy, had the logic of what we were pushing for gone to the ultimate conclusion. That's the story I tell in the book, but it's also very relevant to me personally now because I look back with great regret at having been part of a movement that in effect set something in motion that wound up with people being shot and killed, literally, in the case of people like Dr. Tiller, or in the case of, for instance, the black security guard who was killed at the Holocaust Museum by this right-wing fanatic. We were part of a movement that was not necessarily responsible for those people individually, but we certainly helped set something in motion that when it went to the fringe, was taken to the logical conclusion, has resulted, and I believe in the future will again, result in violence.